Hey, my name is ShawNshawN. I do art on ShawNshawN.co and specials on eBay. Today I'm going to review Hotel Mumbai. So Hotel Mumbai is actually based off a real terrorist attack in 2008 in the city of Mumbai, formerly known as Bombay, which is a British name, but Mumbai is more the original name. So basically it starts off kind of this terrorist group from Pakistan infiltrates, Mumbai from the city. It just comes in by boat and just lands. They take taxis and immediately go to the sites, and then they have this really timed sequence of where they want to hit. Just based on the reality of the events, they were very successful in that they did attack, several parts of the city. The city didn't have really a military police to really go after these guys with, armed specific training. Because of this lack of military presence, it was really, the special forces were headquartered in New Delhi, but it's 8 hours away. So it really creates a crisis in Mumbai because they can't get there in time to save all these people just being shot at randomly. Just, no one thought they would have a terrorist attack of this type. So the story covers the first attack, which is the train station, and then later one of the other attacks in the Taj Hotel. And they don't cover the other 10 attacks. They probably could have, but it would have been a 5-hour miniseries, right? So they're just trying to wrap it up. It's only 2 hours, 3 minutes, so it's, fairly tidy, only mostly on the Mumbai hotel. And a little bit of the beginning of where the terrorists land. From there, once they get to the Taj Mahal, it's the story of a Russian CEO, and he's staying there with some prostitutes, as well as a family, an architect, and his Pakistani Indian wife, I'm not sure which one, and they have money and they're staying there. There was a backpacking couple as well, and of course other Indians were staying there, the Indian staffs, and as well as they cover some of the Indian staff. So they cover the story of Imran, which is this Punjabi guy. So Punjabi is from the north of India, which is close to Pakistan, so people kind of suspect them they might have terrorist ties, even though they're never involved, because Punjabi are similar to Christians in that they believe like in a singular God, and most Indians have this kind of multicultural multi-gods, many gods, right? And then in Pakistan, it's highly Muslim, so it's obviously the Muslims, right? So even though Punjabi has a single god as well, they're never usually in a terrorist group. But there's always this stigma attached since they're close to the border. There might be connections. Punjabi's trying to break off. It's a part of India, part of Pakistan. It's kind of a football between the two countries, really. But it's really used to be its own country, and then it was kind of taken over by India and Pakistan, right? It was like its own kingdom. So it's literally a nail biter. I mean, I was literally biting these fingers down because it really captures really well the sense of terrorism and that you don't know what's going on. You're part of the public. You're running here and there. These guys are just randomly shooting people, and so when they hit, no one knows why they came. And so it really captures from the sense of the victims and how the city probably felt at the time when they were attacked. And I kind of wish they'd cover a little bit of the motivation of the group. People obviously know this attack happened, but if you're not from India, Pakistan, you may not know a little bit about the history, like the split of Pakistan and India and how that was so brutal. And there was always this really blame game, as people that moved from India, Muslims moved to Pakistan, they lost their property and stuff. They were very bitter and say, oh, they stole our stuff. And then people that were in Pakistan area and they were Hindu or other sects, anything but Muslim, they moved back and they lost all their property as well. So it was kind of this bitterness on both sides. And so that's kind of one of the main motivations to the attack, that, hey, they stole our property. And they kind of cover that a little bit. I don't know how you would cover more, but it would also be interesting too, because the reality is once they kind of peel back the onion and investigated this further, it turns out some of the ex-soldiers of ICI, which is the Pakistani military, so one of the ex-officers actually helped train these guys. So you're like, ooh, this is really bad, right? And these guys trained in the mountains, similar to like how the Taliban trained, or Osama bin Laden trained his stuff. And then, Osama bin Laden was also in northern Pakistan, right next to ICI, and you're like, and another terrible thing is the actual perpetrators, the mastermind, is in Pakistan. He never went to jail for this. And you're like, and so if you think about it now, like later on, I think last year, there was actually Pakistan and India almost went to war. And they've been to several small wars on the border clash. But it's really dangerous because they both have nuclear weapons, and they're starting border wars. You're like, of course, like U.S. has also the same issue in Syria. We're fighting on the opposite side of Russia, and it's like we both have nuclear weapons and could destroy the world. But hey, let's go save Syria. Although I was pro for that, but then it's kind of like, it's so dangerous, right? I mean, so the other really cool part about the film is they're actually throwing in part of the film of the actual TV as they film what's happening in Mumbai from 2008. So they've mixed that into the film. So you really feel like you're on the ground experiencing the terror as, one of the victims. And then it makes you think, is that really appropriate way to do it? Is it respectful to the victims? It's kind of a dilemma because you want to document, but at the same time, you don't want to encourage terrorism. But, I think it was pretty well done. I mean, it's definitely an important event to cover. Yeah, one of the sad parts of this film, when I went to the film, so I got there a little late, just right when it starts, right? But there's only 4 people opening weekend. This is a really bad sign. It's a really good movie. But the topic, people don't want to go see terrorism, like a real life terrorism. I mean, it's fun to go see Bruce Willis before 9/11 and blow up a building and all this stuff, and it's just kind of wang bang, and it's a goofy Hollywood flick, and I think people like that kind of goofiness when you don't take it seriously and you make kind of fun of the terrorists. Then it's really a fun type of genre. But when you really document and cover what they really did, yeah, it's kind of a really creepy undertone, and there's kind of like, who wants to go see that? I mean, I definitely wanted to see it because I thought it would be really pulls into my interest as far as my art, political pop. But yeah, it's going to be hard to find the audience. I mean, I don't think India, Pakistani might not be ready for this film, and they're probably the primary audience, maybe because it's 2008. It's only like 10 years ago, right? I mean, everyone that's alive from there is probably still alive, so it's very sensitive there. American audience, you're gonna have 9/11. They probably don't want to see too much terrorism. It might do well in Europe. Europe is probably more open to this in the sense that they've had minor terrorist attacks, but not in a crazy scale, or it was done previously. Like, for example, in Britain they had the Troubles, which is all these terrorist attacks with the IRA, and they've kind of put that to bed. It's kind of, it's very cold war at this point. There's a little bit of warm flicker here and there, like a little attack here and there, but not so bad. Same with ETA in Spain. It's kind of wind down more or less. So Europe might have a better feel for this and really might be the audience, hopefully, to go see this, and because it's a really good story to go see. I mean, it'd be a shame if it goes straight to DVD, but sometimes that happens. But yeah, it's just people like to escape reality. They don't want to face it. A lot of people have troubles in life, so they're not going to want to see this, or if they're successful, they don't want to look at the bad side of life as well. So it's kind of like, well, who's the audience for this, right? It's a very important film, though. One of the things that's really good about the film was they had layers, so they show kind of the classism. The way that they capture this is through 2 characters. One is through Imran. So Imran's the Punjabi kind of waiter, and he's one of the chief waiters. Well, he's not the chief waiter, but he's an up-and-coming waiter, and he has a family. But he's kind of like, he's one of the lower caste because he's like this caste from the north, which is kind of suspected to be terrorists, even though they're not. So he's always kind of under circumspect. They're second-guessing him, and he comes to work, and he drops his shoes. So then he doesn't have any shoes. His boss is going to send him home, but luckily his boss has a second pair of shoes, and he's like, oh, thank God, because my new baby's coming. I have to pay the bills. And so you have that as far as him trying to fit in there. And then later, once the attacks happen, they're trapped in this big room in the top. One of the white women is just freaking out. She's an older woman from the 60s, and kind of this latent racism comes out as far as she thinks he's one of the, labeled to one of the terrorists because he wears a turban, right? Because he covers his hair and he has long hair. That's part of the Punjabi belief that they don't cut their hair or they don't cut their beard, and he has a beard, but he has it basically well managed, right? But because he's wearing a beard and all this, it's kind of, she relates it to Muslim, right? Even though he's not, it's a different religious sect, but she doesn't know. And so one of the top, like the sous chef, basically, not before the chef, but the sous chef, the second guy, he's like, just get out go in the kitchen, just disappear, that'll calm her down. He's like, no. And he goes up and talks to her and say, hey, here's my family on my phone. I believe in this. If you want to take this off, it's my sacred belief, but I'll take it off if it makes you feel better, because I know there's an attack. It's really unnerving everyone, right? So it's a really cool way of talking that. And then not only that, but then later they're like trying to escape down through the hotel, and the police break in, and they meet Imran by himself, and he has blood all over his shirt because he was holding this girl who was about ready to die. And he has blood over, so they sex he's a terrorist. He's like, no, stop. So he has to kind of, so he is again confronted as being maybe a possible terrorist because of his caste, So it has this really interesting thing with caste. Another guest they have is this Pakistani Indian woman. I think she's Pakistani. She's kind of married this American architect, and so she's really high end. She's trying to get away from all this religious belief and all this craziness, and she's trying to be modern and almost agnostic, right? Because she doesn't believe religion leads to anything good, because in Pakistan all the Islamic belief is leading to people being poor and miserable and starting terrorism, and she's like, oh, that's a bunch of crap, right? So she has to face, also in the same room where they're kind of under hostage, she's talking to her parents. Obviously, she's freaking out, so she's talking to them in, I think it's Urdu for Pakistan. It's the native tongue in Pakistan, right? And they're like, oh, she's one of them, she's one of them. And luckily, there's this Russian, because her husband went off, and so they're separated, so she's just by herself, and no one to defend her. And this Russian CEO steps in, he's like, no, fuck off, lady. So he steps up, which is interesting, because this guy's going to see prostitutes, right? But then he kind of feels honored to defend this woman. So it captures that, in a way. So that's really cool as well. And there's this other scene where she's one of the hostages. They're shooting people randomly, and the only thing that saves her is she starts speaking in the Pakistani Urdu, and she starts doing the Muslim prayers. And earlier in the film, her mother says, oh, you should pray. And she's like, oh, that's useless. There's nothing going to save us in this. And she actually is praying in the end, and that saves her from being shot. But unfortunately, her husband gets shot. And it's really interesting as well because the family gets separated and the baby's upstairs and the terrorists are killing down the floor, and then they're down in the restaurant, and then they're hiding out. They don't know where the baby is, and they're calling back and forth. And then at some point the phones go dead, so the husband rushes out to try to find the baby, and he finds the kid, and they try to escape. They get separated, and then he gets captured, right? And then his wife is freaking out in the bomb below, and she's like, I gotta find my baby. And she goes up and she gets captured. So it's like, oh my god, they're gonna die together. It's terrible, right? So it has this really nice aspect of the confusion under terrorism, how people make bad choices. The people that stay behind in this well-secured room, they almost get shot too as well, and barely make it out of the room, and a lot of them get shot on the way out. So if they stay behind, you get shot. If you leave early, you might get shot. These other people that didn't even think they try to escape earlier in the film, they get shot. So it's complete randomness. They really capture how well these guys were trained as far as, they're kind of college students, but they were trained to be soldiers. Just, it captures this really historic event and the real sense of terrorism and the real sense of it versus kind of this Hollywood goofiness. And a lot of Indian Bollywood films as well, they'll do a lot of goofy takes on it because, people want to relax, right? So this is a really serious take on it. There's no dancing, so it's legit, but all Indian actors, really well done. And I think they did a really good job. I would say I would be really shocked if it's not contender for best, foreign film for Oscars. If it's not, it'd be like, dude, the Oscar people are stupid. But since it's kind of a grisly topic early in the year, it might not be seen as much, or people don't want to see it. So they're just gonna say, whatever. They say they saw it, but they don't really see it, and they vote on it. So who knows? Yeah, if you want to go see what terrorism's about, and they did a really good job. That would have gave it a little more meat to the terrorists, why they're sacrificing themselves, right? And the training they went through. That would have been kind of interesting. Obviously, you could only cover so much, and you don't want to glamorize the terrorists, but it kind of would have gave a little more what happened, how they got there. Yeah, I think it's a pretty good snapshot. It'll be interesting if they do other films like this in the future on terrorism. I don't think they really covered 9/11 yet, and it's been was it 2001? So it's 17 years later, but still, it's it's still pretty touchy for people, so they probably should do one. I don't know how much you're going to do because they hit and then it's going to be really sensitive. They might not do that for 20 years, especially the way the American audience is, not because they're any different than India, but the censorship at the box office is different for terrorism. So they probably won't do it for quite a long time. It'll be really interesting when they do. I think it would be nice if they shot it now because they could get the historical detail right. But again, you'd have a same issue like with this film where no one's going to go see it. Who's going to spend millions of dollars to go make a film that you're not going to see? It's kind of especially after this film, for sure it's going to might not do well. I don't know. Maybe you're going to have people that want to see it. I mean, I definitely liked it and highly encourage people to see it, especially, young adults, 20s. It kind of gives you that perspective on what happened in India. A little bit kind of unrolls the onion of the caste between India, Pakistan, this hatred that's kind of captured. This just goes all the way back to the Pakistani-Indian split, right? So they don't really cover that well, but you can feel the tension and what happened there and how Indian has this caste system, and they kind of blame Britain for that, so that's really interesting. And obviously British are racist as well, so it's not like they're off the hook, but it's kind of interesting because I've seen a lot of Indians, they don't really take full responsibility for the caste system. They think the British put it there, and I think that's not really the case. It was there before, and the British were just figured out which caste to put against each other to manipulate the system. Same like they did in Iraq when British ruled that. They put a minority Sunni in charge of a Shiite population, so the Sunni they only wanted to survive, right? Same in Syria, they put the Alawites in power, and they're a minority sect, over a Sunni population, so the Sunnis were pissed, but the Alawites are such a minority, there's no way for them but to stay in power, or they're going to be slaughtered, their whole family, right? So, yeah, I mean, Britain did manipulate that, and they probably didn't set up the borders right. They should have split it between the Shiite Sunni, but, naive imperial powers, right? As they split up the Turkish Ottoman Empire. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this boils down if you're going to continually see terrorist attack between India and Pakistan, because this is one of the worst ones, and it's from 2008, so it's pretty recent. They keep having like blow up a temple here, try to take over this temple there. So it's really kind of a dicey topic in India itself, and as well as Pakistan, obviously. Anyway, I hope you guys like it. I like the movie a lot. I'd highly recommend it. It's not for the faint of heart. I wouldn't take young kids to this. It'd really terrorize them. If you want to subscribe, you can subscribe below. And I'll see you in the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.